The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Bonjour, beautiful Bitcoiners.
Stefan Kinsella, patent attorney, libertarian author from c4sif.org.
Laissez-les bon temps rouler.
Martine Wishmayer from General Bytes.
Good evening, Bitcoin.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. Issue one, we finally know who FTX owes money to. Wall Street elite, big tech, airlines, and many more. That's right, not your keys, not your coins is a lesson to corporations now, as the major losers in FTX seem to be large corporations. Just as they said in the great movie The Paper, they lost a lot of some fancy people's money. Dan Eve, what do you think about the FTX client list?
Well, it's another eye opener again, isn't it? As to who's actually been investing in these crypto companies. Obviously, before it panned out that FTX was a giant fraud, crazy kind of money hiding and manipulation scheme by Sam Bankman-Fried. There are a lot of actual big institutions dipping into it, and that's kind of evident from these documents that have been published. They have said like there is a bunch of names in there. I think they use Goldman Sachs as an example, who are on the list, but they may not actually be creditors. But the fact is that there's definitely a lot of big names on there. And it shows that the institutions have been dipping into cryptocurrency companies, not necessarily buying Bitcoin, which they should be, and just holding their keys so they don't get scammed as people get burned continuously through the since the inception of man, right? Anything can be defrauded from you, will be, and therefore just buy the Bitcoin and own it, and don't give it to someone else to look after it for you, who's going to rehypothecate it, and that money's just going to change hands so many times. But it's the same scenario as what happened when Celsius went down, right? There was the Celsius list was incredible, and of the investors there was even governments, there were actual central banks that were on the list. So there was, every time one of these companies goes down and these lists of creditors gets published, there's more big institutions and big companies, even governments, popping out the woodwork that have actually invested in cryptocurrency whilst being very silent, or even dismissing Bitcoin under the hood. So I think JP Morgan was another one that was listed on here. So yeah, I think it's a good sign but obviously bad what's happened with FTX, but it's a good sign in general about all of these companies, institutions, governments that are actually dipping into cryptocurrency in some way at least, which gets them on the journey to learning about Bitcoin and then holding their own private keys. And as we say about the, not your keys, not your coins, the problem with investing in companies rather than just buying the Bitcoin yourself is kind of like not your keys, not your privacy. Because if something ends up happening to that company, then your investment then gets publicized, which I'm sure you'd rather just hold Bitcoin and be happy with holding the Bitcoin and not have any of the third party risk that you do have with investing in a random company that's going to throw money everywhere.
JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Netflix, Meta, and even Apple. Stefan Kinsella, what do you think of these FTX investors?
Well, no, I agree with Dan, actually. So I think that, if you're going to invest in crypto, you can do it the right way or you can do it the other way. But the problem is they've demonized Bitcoin because of the energy stuff and because they don't understand it. So they go into these speculative investments, and I'm not in favor of scammers and pyramid schemers and FTX people and shitcoiners, but they are separating idiots from their money, which I don't think is a bad thing. Maybe will teach people a lesson in the long run. If you want to hold a currency that can withstand the inflationary problems of a fiat currency, it's going to be a cryptocurrency, and that will be Bitcoin. that's simple, and it's not sexy because it's boring. You have to wait for a few years, but they want returns and they want to leverage. And so, you pay the price when you do these things.
Martine Wishmayer, the usual drenching. Welcome to Bitcoin. Lose all your money. Greetings for the corporations.
Yeah, and now, at least now we know why all our favorite Netflix shows are being canceled at this moment, because they're out of money. But you put all your money in a shitcoin casino. What can possibly go wrong? So it's very sad that it's all went down the tubes. But it's better if the large corporations lose the money, I think, than if individual investors lose it. But I think they learned the hard way. Not your coin, not your keys, not your coins. So next time, I think they're better off buying Bitcoin instead and hold it in a multi-sig wallet.
Moving on to the exit question. A new article says institutions announce for 85% of Bitcoin buying. Should we welcome our new institutional overlords? And what about that plan where the poor and the normal people had a chance to buy Bitcoin again? Dan, Eve, what do you think about the institutions on their way in again?
Well, it's always been a meme, hasn't it? Like in Bitcoin adoption, there's kind of two sides to it, right? There's one is places accepting Bitcoin, and that everyone gets kind of excited about, like when a big kind of big company lends legitimacy to Bitcoin by accepting it as a form of payment. And the other side is the very enemy that Bitcoin stands to replace it in terms of the existing monetary system. When the leaders of that monetary system actually dip into Bitcoin, that lends a lot of credence to Bitcoin and validates it. So it's positive that institutions are buying in, but it is sad that the everyday people are still lagging way behind, and they are going to be, by the time it really becomes ubiquitous, the institutions would have already been in. And the average person is going to be buying $1 million fractions of $1 million Bitcoin.
Stefan, should we welcome our new institutional overlords?
Well, I'm of mixed minds of this, of course, but I actually think that so if we were to get let's say an ETF approved, I guess we'll talk about that later, one of our other talking points, it would pave the way for more people to get a stake in this. And that's what I hope will happen. So I'm not opposed to this at all. I think that people should be able to have many avenues to get exposure to this, but it's just too difficult at the current time. The SEC keeps denying ETFs to Grayscale and to other companies. Why are they doing this? Why don't they let people do what they want to do with their 401ks and their savings plans?
Martine Wishmayer, is this like that time when they opened a special trading bank at JP Morgan and only let the rich trade cryptos?
Yeah, I don't really mind the institutions. I think it validates Bitcoin as being like a serious investments category. And I believe once it became over a market cap of $1 billion or $1 trillion or something, it justified having a good look at it from like an investment management perspective. Personally, I buy Bitcoin. I get cash back on my credit card and I turn it into Bitcoin. Every penny I get back, I put it into Bitcoin. So no matter what the price is, whether it's 20K, whether it's 70K, or whether it's 100K, I will still be, putting my cash back into Bitcoin. And I think if we would all do this, then the price of Bitcoin, would go to infinity. It's just bound to happen. But unfortunately, many people have weak hands. They sell and they buy, and then they think they can game the market. But it doesn't work like that. You just have to buy some Bitcoin and buy some more and buy some more. And yes, if the price is down, we get more Bitcoin, more sats for less. But even if the price is up, I still don't change anything. I just keep buying Bitcoin. Just buy them all.
Buy them all. Moving on to issue 2. Bitcoin could be a key to saving the environment. Yes, you read that correctly. A new article claims that Bitcoin might actually be good to help the environment, helping use excess and stranded energy and turning it into a store of value. Then the renewables industry will become more cost effective and economically viable. Meanwhile, a new nuclear powered Bitcoin mine is opening in the United States. Bitcoiners are trying to make the notoriously polluting cryptocurrency a little more green. Stefan Kinsella, what do you think about the new green Bitcoin?
Well, I think that the entire environmental industry is anti-human, and I'm like an Ayn Randian on this thing. I mean, I think the whole climate stuff is nonsense, and so nuclear. I've long been a fan of nuclear power because of its technical differences with the other industries. But one benefit of it is that it's like not polluting. But the problem is this: it's not polluting because it's not putting carbon into the atmosphere. But to my mind, carbon is plant food. So I'm not so sure that like that's a drawback of nuclear, that we won't put as much CO2 into the atmosphere. So we won't have as green of a planet if we have a totally nuclear planet. On the other hand, the environmentalists, they won't admit that that's one benefit of it from their point of view. And then they focus on nuclear waste as the other thing, like they know anything about it, which they don't. So I what I think is the best thing that will happen, and probably will happen, is that you have all these flares of these fossil chemical plants and things in Texas and in other states. I think these things will be colonized, as well as hydroelectric, nuclear too, as well, and even volcanic and hydroelectric. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with harvesting wasted energy, but I think that trying to meld the Bitcoin agenda onto this climate change bullshit and pseudoscience is not the way we should go. We should not buy into the idea that, oh, we're going to destroy the climate unless we do A, B, and C. So that's kind of my perspective. I can understand why people do that, to try to get regulatory approval or to try to get local approvals. But I don't think that Bitcoin's promise is to stop us from a climate disaster that's not coming in the way that is predicted by mainstream people.
I can say I agree with you a little bit that previously I was against nuclear power, worried about the waste. But if you look at our other power generation alternatives, renewables just aren't going to cut it, especially at night. So I think we will need a nuclear background. I think it's neat to use Bitcoin for this. And like you said, for the flares and for hydropower places where getting enough batteries up there might not be an option. Burning some of that power into a Bitcoin mine is an exciting use of it. Although I'm not sure if this nuclear plant is going to be the best. This might have been the one that they raised with a startup, and it's not really related to the government or a larger power company. And when they generate enough waste, I don't know what the problem is. Probably shut it down, move on to the next one. Martine Wishmayer, what do you think about nuclear-powered Bitcoin mining?
I'm not a big fan of nuclear power myself. We've had our fair share of problems here in Europe with it. Well, the US had its problems, but and we see now, especially now that the war in the Ukraine, they're constantly bombing near or even bombing the power plant itself and not using any nuclear bombs or anything. Could spell the worst disaster ever. So if we can avoid it, I think we should avoid it. There's plenty of other alternatives, like here in Portugal. I didn't want green energy, but I just took an energy company, and apparently it's all green. I mean, every single electron flowing through the system is either hydropower, wind power, or solar. And you're right, at night there's not enough solar power, but it will just throw some hydro in the mix. And I don't think we need any nuclear energy, but unless you live in France, because that's just all nuclear. But for the rest in Europe, I know Portugal, no need for it. And I see more future in the using the gas methane and waste methane from drilling and all, and using that as a source of fuel for mining Bitcoin, especially given the fact that you can just use this energy at the location. You don't have to transport it. You don't have to compress it. You can just use it where you would normally flare it. Just put some modular boxes there, fill them one with a generator and the rest with mining equipment. And when the field runs dry or production stops, you just load your mining modules on a truck and you put them at the next spot. So I think that is very green compared to any other alternative. And sure, there are no carbon emissions from nuclear energy, but we're still struggling with the waste which we store on site. And I've seen some documentaries about the US that they're not really good at managing the waste either, and they just leave it at a plant location. And they're still discussing whether they should bury it all in a mountain or not, but nobody wants to be near the mountain, or the people near the mountain don't want it. So it is a bit of an issue. And yes, it might be cheap to produce. It is good for decades, but we're just pushing the problems to the next generation. And that, I don't know, I don't think we need to. It's not that we don't have any other alternatives. And I drive a gasoline car because I don't want to have a battery operated car. I know you drive battery operated car, Thomas, but for me, I like my car to have a nice range, and the same goes for everything. So I'm not a tree hugging hippie myself, but I think if possible, we should just, use the methods that are, low hanging fruits basically as energy sources. And I think methane, instead of flaring gas, we should just use it for Bitcoin mining.
Dan, Eve, up and at them. What do you think about nuclear-powered Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, hell yeah. Well, I mean, there's two different types of. I mean, one's not around yet, right? So the current method is nuclear fission, where there's a lot of radioactive waste, and there's been all sorts of cool ideas discussed about how to get rid of it. Whether it's one of them is to fire it at the sun, but the problem is if one rocket goes off in the atmosphere, blows up, and then you've just spread nuclear waste all around the atmosphere. So that's not a great idea. But burying it, I think it's Norway. I think it's one of the Scandinavian countries. They bury they encase the radioactive waste in concrete and then put it a kilometer or so down into the Earth's crust underneath a mountain. So the likelihood of that even coming up is so insanely small. And if it does, it's it's a giant thing of concrete. But ultimately, one thing that is quite cool is that there's the positivity around. I suppose City AM's like a big London sort of finance newspaper, and they call a finance section. And it's good that they're acknowledging the positive things around Bitcoin. So that article discusses about the way that Bitcoin actually incentivizes clean energy, and even that there was another article that was around the CNET article around that did blabber on about how the really positive thing for cryptocurrency happened last year when Ethereum dropped 99% of its emissions or whatever. But the fact that obviously they skip out the fact that Ethereum is now suffering from the same thing that proof of stake has always suffered from, which is it essentially can still be gamed by the biggest holders of the currency, whereas proof of work is a lot more distributed and less likely to be gamed. So it's much gamed. So it's a much better system. But it incentivizes cheap electricity. And in that very same article, it discusses that the cheapest electricity is around renewables, especially where there's excess. And putting the infrastructure in place where you have windmills that can't produce energy or don't produce energy all of the time, but still will produce excess amount of energy that you can't actually store anywhere. It's good to put it into a usage doing something else, which in this case is Bitcoin mining, since there's really not enough good methods of storing electricity at the moment, and you can't pump it across vast distances because it just loses its power, as it were, along the way. And so we're kind of reaching that stage now where maybe this is the 21st century's E equals MC squared, where we realize that energy and mass are interchangeable, but energy and money are interchangeable in this sense. And energy is money, and you need, energy is what all life on Earth needs to exist. And so it makes sense that all of our trading should be somehow linked to energy in terms of the value that we're trading. So ultimately, it's good for Bitcoin that there's so much more research going into it, and it's not just a bunch of articles that really aren't very well researched, just saying that Bitcoin is bad for the environment, and they're looking at all angles. And one of the things that was really cool in that article that I didn't realize was that and even with all the things that I've read about Bitcoin mining and even all the positive spin on it, the fact that Bitcoin is the amount of energy that Bitcoin mining uses is 0.02%, 0.002% of the global energy, 0.002%. Now, I bet most people listening would have thought, because of all these articles that you see about how bad Bitcoin mining is, that it would be using way more electricity than that, because it uses more than whole countries. But it's absolutely minuscule compared to all the other industries, from, especially even from gold. It's like a fifth of the gold and jewelry industry, and it's like, it's less than hundreds and hundreds of the thousands of the transportation industry, just land transport alone, let alone sea and air and stuff like that. So whilst people go on about the Bitcoin energy consumption, and there's these cool sound bites of saying Bitcoin uses more than a country and blah blah blah. It uses actually minuscule amounts of energy, and it also drives energy prices down, because it puts more infrastructure in place to be able to compete, because there's more ways to monetize that energy where you wouldn't have been able to monetize it before.
The M stands for money. And we do have an update. While we usually complain that PlayStations and Xbox use more money than Bitcoin, there has been an update to Xbox where they will update the Xbox during the times where it's most likely that low energy use will be going on, so low cost. They've also made it so the Xboxes have a new sleep function that actually puts the device to sleep and doesn't waste all that power, so we won't be able to say that Xboxes and PlayStations use more power than Bitcoin anymore. But this has become a whole political issue in itself. They call Xboxes woke now because of these settings. But let's move on to the exit question, kind of a out of nowhere question, although Dan covered it slightly psychically, knowing that it was coming. A new plan by NASA wants to create a nuclear-powered spaceship for long-distance exploration. The problem is, how do we get the nuclear power there? Should we launch the spaceship from Earth with the nuclear power inside ready to go? Should we use one of our existing spaceships to launch perhaps just the plutonium, then build the spaceship in outer space? Or should we not do such a thing at all because of, like Dan said, the obvious risk of the rocket exploding and destroying all life on this planet? Stefan Kinsella, what do you think of our amazing new plans to explore the cosmos?
Well, I actually, I'm not so concerned about the risks of an explosion, whatever. I'm a libertarian at heart, right? So my view always is, why are we doing this? And who's paying for it? Is it worth it? And I think that all these moonshots and all these space explorations, they're all just soaking the taxpayer for some kind of grandiose thing that will glorify NASA or some congressman or some administration. And I think it's all bullshit. I think let's let it be private. And if it makes sense, let it happen in its own time. We don't need to rush things. I mean, it's a little bit bizarre that we landed on the moon. The U.S. landed on the moon in 1969, but it's been like dead for 50 years. That sort of indicate, and the technology has gotten way better in the meantime, but we still haven't gone back to the moon, but we're about to, right? But it shows that it's like not economically feasible. So I think that we should focus on having a solid set of laws that protects the rights of the people on the earth and lets them live good lives, not these spectacular moonshots and things like this. let it happen organically when it's ready to happen.
What's interesting about this space program is some of the best programs have been the spin-offs, like Velcro, fireproof clothing, and missiles that could hit Russia.
And Tang, of course, Tang. Don't forget Tang.
And Tang, and astronaut ice cream. Martine, what do you think of NASA's plan? Should we send up the plutonium?
We need more missiles for Russia.
Oh, I thought we weren't going to get political. That's pretty political.
No, that was one of the benefits we had, like, from the space exploration. But no, I totally agree that we should have a private enterprise do this and not waste taxpayers' money on some, I don't know, prestige project which doesn't help anyone on planet Earth. So yeah, no.
Dan, Eve, are you going to go with space here?
What? Sorry, what was the question? I got carried away in chat.
Should we send the nuclear-powered rocket into space?
Oh well, it depends. It depends, right? Because even I think sending the difference between sending large amounts of nuclear waste that's just to be disposed of, trying to fly it to the moon or whatever, then it's only enough to power a rocket to go somewhere is minuscule compared to big chunks of depleted uranium or whatever it is that they're going to be throwing into space. Or is it depleted uranium? No, I don't know. Maybe I just got that from a film or something, like what's it called? The train one with Stephen King. What's his name? Steven Seagal.
I'm pretty sure they use that for bullet shells. So I don't know if they need those on the space station. Yeah.
But no, we have nuclear powered rockets. Cool. But anyway, this conversation in maybe 10 years time, hopefully, is all going to be is going to be old school, because we're going to have finally cracked nuclear fusion, which there's it seems like it's getting pretty close, right? It's going to be 10, 15 years away. Didn't they the other day? Within the last month, they finally reached a point where they produced more energy than it took to actually power up the reactor, but for fractions of a fraction of a second. So, you just need to sustain that.
I thought that we've been pretty close to realizing this for the past 50 years or so. So
yeah, I think nuclear fusion is complete. So in my opinion, this is I don't know. The environmentalists oppose nuclear fission power, even though it's the best thing we have going, to be honest, for almost every possible source. And they say, well, if we have nuclear fusion, we'll be in favor of that. But they know that that's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. But for the next 50 years, nuclear fission, we can have that. And that can have low carbon emissions and no pollution, whatever. But then they'll say, well, then what about the nuclear waste? I mean, this idea of sending nuclear waste into outer space is insane. First of all, if you send it into outer space, you don't have to send it into the sun. Once you send it into outer space, where do you care where it goes? But we could bury it a kilometer or put it in the Marianas Trench in the ocean. It will never be, or by the time it's going to be discovered, it will be the waste will be decayed. But there's things you can do other than sending it into outer space. The point is, the left and the environmentalist left put these impossible obstacles. They'll say, well, we don't want nuclear fission because there's the waste problem. And we're in favor of nuclear fusion, but that's never going to happen. So I think we should compromise and say, okay, if we can have nuclear fission as a backstop that can back up all these soft power sources, right? Like hydropower and solar, which are all intermittent and have all these other storage problems. If you oppose nuclear fission, you're not really an environmentalist, in my view, right?
Well, you guys probably aren't going to like this, but that's exactly what Bill Gates says in his new book, How to Solve the Climate Crisis, is that, yes, in addition to renewables, though we don't like it, we're going to need the nuclear power. We're going to need that.
But we should like it. It's better than renewables. Energy. Renewables have so many problems compared to nuclear, but everyone has this. People conflate nuclear
It's one of those things like
bombs with nuclear power.
a solar panel never killed anybody, but a nuclear
No.
power plant explosion like killed lots of people. Like it's
Yeah,
hard to.
yeah, but people think that nuclear power means nuclear bombs, but they're totally different technologies. There's a whole history which is interesting, which we can't get into here, but the American, Western, the world nuclear power project went towards plutonium instead of towards thorium, because the thorium process doesn't produce the fissile fuels you need for nuclear bombs. And so the entire world's nuclear power industry was distorted because of the need for nuclear weapons, because of the Cold War and all this kind of stuff. But if we had just done it,
it always seemed really convenient that to run the power plants, we also get the radioactive
it's
stuff.
convenient. Yeah, but thorium wouldn't do that. So I think thorium could be the future, but we don't know because the governments they keep blocking us. China may be onto something here. We don't know yet, but I think that thorium fission nuclear plants may be the future of power production for the future, but we'll see.
And we can use them to mine Bitcoin.
Yes, absolutely.
Moving on to the next issue, check out worldcryptonetwork.com, where you could click on the host and guest button, and it'll load all of the various hosts and guests who have been on our show. Look, Will Pangman and more at worldcryptonetwork.com. Issue 3, Bitcoin hash rate tops new milestone with miner hodling at a 1-year low. Martin Wijmeyer, the hash rate is high, but the hodling is low. What's going on with Bitcoin miners?
I guess they just have bills to pay. The price has been down, so they've been hodling for, usually when you mine some coins, you keep them until the price is better, and then you realize your profits. But if the pressure of like the energy bill in most cases is mounting up, and that you don't have any options, you just have to sell. I don't really think there's a big relation to the price of Bitcoin, that it will mean that Bitcoin will go up in the near future or anything, but I'm never too worried about it. If miners drop off because they're no longer profitable and they stop operations, the hash rate might go down a bit, but the hash rate is so high anyway, it could halve and the network would still be secure. So I'm not worried at all, to be honest.
It does seem like a very strange rally, perhaps coming up for Bitcoin, with the institutions making all the money, the miners and the normal people being left on the side. Dan, Eve, what do you think about the hash rate rising while the hodl rate for the miners is falling?
Well, the hash rate it's I mean, even on Bitcoin charts, it's saying like 295 now, and it hit above, I think, 300 and something, 316 exahashes. It's incredible. It just keeps on growing, and it shows that even though the price of Bitcoin is kind of it's at multi-year lows, the fact is that if you keep saying the infrastructure keeps on being built, the investment's happening. There's the nuclear powered Bitcoin, there's volcano powered Bitcoin. Like, all these projects are growing, they're not actually stopping. So all of this is very positive, and it just goes to show that even despite the kind of price action where people got out their obituaries again, their Bitcoin obituaries, the hash rate is completely like spitting in their face, hitting all-time highs over 22 and now in 23. So obviously the miners, they're probably hedging their bets a bit, right, just in case. So I think a few weeks ago I said a dead cat bounce. I thought, maybe this little pump's a dead cat bounce. I was wrong. What I meant was a bull trap, because obviously it's not dead. It's just, but maybe a bit of a bull trap. And I was hoping it was, because I wanted to buy some more. And I've been sat on the fence saying, or not sat on the fence, but like, come on, it's going to hit like 12k. Come on, that would take it like 85% down from all-time high. But no. Now I'm sat with less Bitcoin than I could have been, because it's down at 23K because Honey Badger don't care. Everything's still moving forward. Like there's more investment happening in Bitcoin mining than ever. There's more hash power than ever. That's something that's really obvious. There's more companies that are fabricating Bitcoin mining chips than ever. And so this whole industry has been growing despite all the price turmoil and all the people poo-pooing Bitcoin, especially about the environmental FUD, and it's been resilient to Ethereum. There was no kind of turning point on hash power when Ethereum started going, oh yeah, we've reduced our emissions by 99%, and Bitcoin's an evil a whale boiling thing, right? There wasn't a turnaround in hash power then. It's just grown even stronger because the clever people know that that's actually just FUD, and it's just BS spread by people who want to make money out of other altcoins or whatever that seem to be trying to get an edge on Bitcoin. But it's great. The hash rate's incredible. The difficulties like 37 trillion, which is insane. And it's only going to grow. It's only going to keep on growing. And just like the network effect is growing too.
Stefan Kinsella, the hash rate is high, but the miner hodl rate is low, despite the traditional wisdom about the gold rush, the winners being the people that sell the shovels. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the details are always going to be fluctuating, right? But I think the ultimate idea is that for the Bitcoin maximalists, for the Bitcoin proponents, the idea is that ultimately you're going to have a cryptocurrency, probably Bitcoin, which will replace the fiat currencies, right? But for that to happen, it has to happen in a certain process. And as that happens, you're going to see more and more people realize that, okay, we need to have one currency, and people are going to realize which one is the best one to have your money in, right? So I think that's what's happening here. People are realizing that this is not going away. It's not going to go to zero. Like all these people that panicked, all my friends, like you mentioned, these people, oh, I missed out. I had people like, oh, I've been telling them like 16,000 Bitcoins on sale, like kind of joking, but not really joking, like it's on sale because we know it's going higher. And they're like, oh, my brother-in-law told me this morning, I missed out. It's 23,000. I missed out. I'm like, okay, but I've heard this story over and over and over again. I missed out. You haven't missed out. It's on its way up. You have to be patient. You have to realize that the tendency of the world is to move towards a one world money, because money is a unique good, which Mises and Hoppe and Rothbard call sui generis, which means it's not a consumer good. It's not a capital good, which means that consumer goods and capital goods are two different types of goods, but they're both of the type that the more of the good, the better, right? So the more ice cream cones you have for consumer goods is better because there's more goods for people to consume, or the more tractors or you have, the better, because you can make more farm equipment, you can build more, develop more farms. But money is a different type of good because it's a useful thing, but if you increase the supply of money, it doesn't increase wealth. So it's different than other types of goods. And what that means is you only need one money for society, right? But if you only need one money, then we have to expect that if the governments don't block this process, and they're trying to, but we don't think they'll be successful, there's going to be a convergence towards one money, and it will eventually replace fiat. And I think that's Bitcoin. So you have this kind of, so this idea that these people that are paranoid, like when Bitcoin goes from 65,000 to 16,000, they get paranoid. I guess they think that if they have a Bitcoin, they're going to lose all of it. How can they lose all of it? They can only lose all of it if Bitcoin goes to zero. If Bitcoin goes to zero, that means we've given up the social project of replacing analog money, fiat, state-controlled money with digital money. I don't think that's ever going to happen. It's like saying we're going to get rid of email and go back to snail mail. It's never going to happen, right? I mean, we've already reached a digital age, and the digital age of money is upon us, but the governments are clinging on to their monopolistic positions, and they're not letting a digital money replace the fiat money, but it will happen eventually, if all things go well. Hopefully, that's my hope anyway. So that's why I think that these things are, people still have hope in them, because they kind of see the potential, they have a glimmer of it, and they kind of sense that it's not going away. It's not going to zero. If it doesn't go to zero, then the sky's the limit.
It also fits the history of the analog to digital conversion that we've been living through in everything in our lives.
Yes.
Everything that's analog gets replaced by digital.
Yes.
Sure, we like newspapers, we liked old film cameras, all these things. It was seamlessly replaced. No one listens to cassette tapes anymore. It's all MP3s. But there's still one analog force of power that demands and deserves your respect: the Bitcoin predictor ball, the greatest predictor in all of Bitcoin history. Now, Dan Eve, predict against the ball. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
I'm stubbornly saying lower.
Stefan Kinsella, higher or lower?
Higher.
Martine Wismayer, we've got a mixed panel so far.
Oh, totally higher. The only way is up.
2-1 higher. Now we'll ask the ball: will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? Most likely, the ball is positive. Moving on to issue 4. Issue 4. Arizona senator introduces bill to make Bitcoin legal tender in the state. Yes, the new legislation would recognize Bitcoin as a form of currency in Arizona, allowing it to be used for all debts, taxes, and other financial obligations. This would mean that all transactions that are currently done in US dollars could be done with Bitcoin, and individuals and big businesses would have the option to use Bitcoin as they see fit. Martine Wismayer, will Arizona become like El Salvador, the United States' Bitcoin republic?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't think it's that important. Like right now, everything I pay for, I pay with Bitcoin. Okay, it's converted on the spot the moment I make a point of sale transaction, but I haven't touched any cash since, well, the beginning of the pandemic. That's like 3 years ago. So everything I pay for is already in crypto. So yeah, and also I don't think that it's good. It shouldn't be forced upon people like in El Salvador. People should, the idea behind Bitcoin is that you decide I want to use Bitcoin. It's not that it should be forced on you. On the other hand, if Arizona would say it's legal tender, then yeah, well, it might. It's good for Bitcoin. It gives it some recognition, but it's not really important in my opinion. I don't know if I make myself clear in that.
Dan Eve, is this the future of Bitcoin adoption? 50 states, 50 legal tender acts?
Well, again, it lends legitimacy to it. And people would like the idea of paying their bills in Bitcoin. Although I'm always talking about this because people don't like spending Bitcoin. If you're really into Bitcoin that much, you don't want to spend it because you're like, oh, I don't want to pay my taxes, because if I pay them next year, then the Bitcoin next year will be worth X amount more. So it's kind of, yeah, and we've all got regrets. Like I've got plenty of stuff. Like I look back at that object that I bought and I think of the one that I bought of that object, and then the pile of them that would have been sat there if I'd have just kept the Bitcoin until now. So there's that regret thing, right? That people have. So if you're paying your taxes, it's almost like it's even worse, right? Because you're like, oh, if I gave that Bitcoin to the government to pay my taxes, it could have been worth X amount now. And like Lars Ulrich, I would have that gold-plated Shark Tank swimming pool or whatever, if I'd have just held on to the corn. But ultimately it's good, right? In terms of infrastructure, in terms of payment exception around the world, it's another positive thing. And the dollar has such a huge stronghold on the world as it is, that I think the US really needs to delve into Bitcoin a bit more rather than keeping it at arm's distance, to make sure that they've got a foot in the door for when Bitcoin does become the global reserve currency eventually down the line. So it's good that the US states are individually opening up. Like Florida have been kind of quite open about it, and so seeing Arizona do the same, I think it's very positive. And where else was it? Was it? I can't remember the word now. Was it that Trace Mayer and oh god,
was it Wyoming or something?
Wyoming, that's it. Wyoming, yeah. So again, this is really positive news that is it Cynthia from Wyoming? So it's just positive altogether that individual states, whilst the US as as a federation of states isn't recognizing Bitcoin specifically, that the individual states are, and that just creates a domino effect. The more that do, the more that will recognize it, and the more that eventually it will become recognized by the wider hierarchy and stuff.
Well, it does sound fun. I'm not sure if I agree. I think Dan's right. We don't really want to pay our taxes in Bitcoin. Like, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, as Jesus said. But if you send your Bitcoin, you lose your Bitcoin. You could have bought so much more stuff, as well as exposing your address. Maybe the government just wants more Bitcoin. Stefan Kinsella, I'm sure you're going to be thrilled with the U.S. government and a state, even a great state like Arizona, giving their official seal to Bitcoin. That's what we need.
Well, so I think that a major country, the U.S., somehow recognizing Bitcoin's status in a way that would. So I think the big impediment towards Bitcoin, one big impediment towards Bitcoin adoption, in addition to the fact that it has to overcome the network effect of the dollar being the main currency, but one big impediment is the fact of capital gains taxes, which applies to assets or commodities that are not considered to be currency or whatever. So I was hoping that the El Salvador recognition of Bitcoin as legal tender would have that effect, because sometimes the U.S. will recognize a foreign currency as legal tender and they won't subject, but they haven't, as far as I know, they haven't done that yet. So I think they're resisting that. And I certainly don't think that any American state can do that. And I frankly doubt that Arizona or any state will actually pass these laws. This is all just vaporware and just talking by activists, which people I support, but I think that they're just like either exaggerating or there's wishful thinking going on here. And the other thing is, I was reading through this thing in the article that we were going through. Arizona says, so they have a definition in this draft law. They define Bitcoin. How do you have to define Bitcoin, right? If you're going to make it legal tender, it's the decentralized peer-to-peer digital currency in which a record of a transaction is maintained on the Bitcoin blockchain. Blah blah blah. So okay, but what's the Bitcoin blockchain? Because you're going to have Craig Wright and these in-chain guys say, "Oh well, BSV is the real one." Like, it's a circular definition. Like, you can't really anchor it to one thing. It's hard to say what Bitcoin is. I guess you could define it by its ticker symbol, BTC, but even ticker symbol is just a privately adopted nomenclature, which some people fight over and dispute, right? So I guess I don't see this. I think it's hopeful that people are moving in this direction. Look, for marijuana legalization, I think that the states are doing something what Tom Woods and the other guys call nullification by gradually legalizing marijuana in the states by their state laws. They're effectively paving the ground for eventual national legalization of marijuana. But money is different, because the money is a national thing, and the federal government has a complete monopoly over that. So let's say that Arizona makes it legal tender in Arizona. What does that mean? Does that mean that I don't have to pay capital gains taxes on my Bitcoin when I convert them into whatever, when I pay my taxes in Arizona? I don't think so. So it's really, to me, a fairly meaningless paper gesture, but one that augurs in a potentially significant direction. But let's wait and see. That's my view on it.
It seems the main change of the El Salvador accepting as legal tender is that the IRS changed their language to say, while some countries do accept Bitcoin as legal tender, we don't, blah, 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 so forth and so forth. Moving on to the exit question, a little bonus Tesla topic here. Tesla keeps losing money on its Bitcoin holdings. Should we be laughing at Tesla as they were fair weather friends to Bitcoin, abandoning it the minute that they heard that Bitcoin might be bad for the environment, even though we've shown it could be good for the environment? Or should we feel sad for Tesla and hope that they do well? Martine Wishmayer, what do you think about Tesla losing money on Bitcoin?
Why are you asking me? I'm not a Elon Musk fan. I would never drive one of their battery operated cars. I don't care if they lose money. I mean, they can probably get some little subsidies and money from the state to cover it up. I don't know. I don't think it's, for me, it's not interesting. They probably will make money later, but they already sold some. So I don't know. I don't really care about Tesla or SpaceX or Elon or Starlink or any of his boring stuff.
They're like a cat and they'll land on their legs. Dan, Eve, what do you think about Tesla losing money on Bitcoin?
Well, I'm still baffled as to how dumb a move that came of them. They pretty much sold the bottom, right? They sold like near the bottom, or at least the local bottom that we have now. But just the fact that they U-turned on the FUD around environmentalism, on a company that kind of prides itself as like cutting edge technology and the best, research which produces the best technology, you'd think they'd have researched the buying of Bitcoin a bit more and the mining process, and number two, they'd have done just a little bit more research on actually how much, on the more positive renewable articles rather than just going on the FUD, the sort of the media headlines. So I think there's probably a bit more to it, like pissed off shareholders that maybe made them make that decision, rather than it being specifically mining orientated or whatever. But it's obviously now it's panning out to be a bit of a bad move, because they could have just held that Bitcoin and it would have gone up probably the same amount that they've apparently just written off. So in that short space of time, so that's really not worked out very well. But also they could have played it. The thing about Musk is he's quite a, what's the word? He's like he plays the media, right? He's a what's the word? Like not extravagant, a word like that. But anyway, he's eccentric, right? He's a bit of an eccentric kind of, plays the media and stuff like that. You'd think that he'd try and, having invested in Bitcoin and the way he's messed around with his own share prices, with the crazy things that he'd say, you'd think he'd be a bit more balls on the table about Bitcoin, like saying, yeah, it's FUD, right? The environmental stuff, it's all FUD. We're an electric car company, that sort of stuff. And they could have done a bit more. So it's strange that they played it the way they did, and they've ended up losing money. As long as they hold, we know ultimately it's gonna go up. So I don't think there's any issue there. But yeah, if they end up selling any more now before the next bull run, they're gonna look like they're gonna have a lot of egg on their face when it eventually hits all-time highs again.
At one point, Tesla had made more money on their Bitcoin holdings than they ever made from all the cars. Stefan Kinsella, what do you think about Tesla's Bitcoin holdings trouble?
Well, anyone who promotes Dogecoin, I mean, I can't feel too sorry for for what happens to them. On the other hand, compared to all the other bad guys out there, Musk is not at the top of the heap. I mean, yes, I think Tesla is basically a subsidy-seeking environmentalist bullshit company. And if electric vehicles make sense, then all the other vehicle companies can do that too, which they're starting to do. And I see no special advantage of Tesla unless there's intellectual property, which they, to their credit, they claim to have disclaimed early on, although they didn't do it officially and formally. So I guess I would say if someone loses money on a Bitcoin investment because they sell when they shouldn't have, then that's just idiots being parted from their money, and that's a good thing.
Oh, come on, Elon. Dollar cost averaging. Got to hold your own keys, man. Get that program, dude.
I mean, Michael Saylor seems to be pretty good on this, right? He's not giving in.
He's doing good so far, and so is El Salvador. They might turn it around. It might be one of those success stories.
Just hodl for a couple of years. Have a long time horizon.
Well, we certainly have a long time horizon for the next story, which we've been talking about forever. Issue 5, SEC rejects ARK21 shares spot Bitcoin ETF for the second time. Yes, once again, the SEC has stopped the ETF. They said that the proposal failed to demonstrate that the proposal is consistent with the requirements surrounding the prevention of fraud and other malevolent practices. They have allowed futures Bitcoin ETFs where you can invest in the futures, but not a spot ETF where you can invest in the underlying asset. Dan, Eve, will we ever get an ETF in the United States?
Well, eventually, yeah, it's going to happen, right? But I think there's probably a bit more pressure from the SEC after the whole FTX debacle, and what wasn't there wasn't there a guy from the SEC resigned over meeting with FTX or stood down,
right? Was that Gary? I don't know if he
not Gary Gensler's their head honcho there, but I'm sure there was someone who was related to the FTX case that had to step aside or something because
there was a lawyer where her husband represented FTX and she had to a judge or a lawyer had to resign themselves from the case. Yeah.
Oh no! Well, I thought it was actually someone. So I got the wrong end of the stick, but I thought it was someone who was actually in the SEC who'd been meeting a couple of times, and so the SEC kind of are caught on the back foot about this one because it's not like I think what wasn't FTX, wasn't Sam Bankman-Fried actually kind of giving the SEC kind of regulatory or was working with them about regulatory advice. So I think that if they having had that link to FTX, that they would kind of have egg on their face by approving a Bitcoin ETF, and if the price dumped a bit or whatever, and they haven't protected people, so I think they're just now in extra cautious mode. So that's probably why it's been rejected. But again, it goes back to the same old argument to say that the Bitcoin price is Bitcoin price can be manipulated and blah blah blah. It's just ludicrous because that happens in the normal world anyway with all the regulation we have. The LIBOR rates rigging, the silver prices, and that was JP Morgan, wasn't it? The silver price rigging for years. So it does happen despite all the regulations, and actually Bitcoin is one of the industries that is under scrutiny a lot at the moment, and is under the public eye a lot at the moment. So yeah, I think it's going to happen eventually, but there's because of the price dip from all-time high and the recent FTX scandal, the FTX scandal with the Celsius BlockFi, all of that trickle of companies that have failed, cascaded sort of upon each other, failing. That's probably put them back a few steps in actually acknowledging Bitcoin as a spot Bitcoin ETF, because they've got to look like they're protecting people. And they haven't protected people very well with those other companies. So,
well, I've been in this Bitcoin ETF game so long. I remember when the Winklevi applied for an ETF several times, and it seemed like they would get it with all of their finance and their background. Stefan Kinsella, do you agree with Dan, Eve? Do you think that SBF and FTX have cost us a chance at a Bitcoin ETF?
I'm not sure. I think there's some kind of opposition to this, right? And I think all the down markets have given ammunition to the federal regulatory agencies and the conservative people that want to wait. I used to think it was inevitable. I'm starting to wonder if they're just going to block it forever. Unlike a lot of the Bitcoin maxers, I think an ETF would be a good thing. So I see no problem with having an alternative way to own Bitcoin. I would love to be able to own some Bitcoin easily in a 401k or or these kind of things. So I'm not sure, but I will say that I noticed that GBTC, which I invested in a while back, hoping it would someday become an ETF, right? And I bought it at a discount, which apparently everyone did, except for a few people in the beginning when it was a premium. But and I just checked online. My latest check is right now it's at a 42% discount from their net asset value, right? So if you sold all their Bitcoins, so anyone who holds GBTC right now, if they liquidated, if my understanding is correct, and I'm not a financial guy, but I think you would get you would get your full value. So you'd get a big bump. And they say they say in their statement that, if they fail in their judicial appeals, we would entertain working constructively with regulators to offer a tender offer. So I think what that means is they're saying we're going to give up and just redeem all the Bitcoin values and just return it to the owners of the GBTC trust, which I assume would mean, I would get, a 40% return or whatever on my investment. So I don't want that to be the case. I'd rather them convert to an ETF and let it rise forward with the market. But if they have to give up, it would be a sad thing. And I hope they don't have to. But we'll see how this case that they're appealing results in.
Well, and part of the reason for the popularity and the existence of the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust is because they won't allow a normal Bitcoin ETF. People have to invest in that or something like MicroStrategy or Riot Blockchain, one of the mining companies, if you want to have that exposure to Bitcoin in your traditional portfolio. Martine Wishmayer, what do you think? Will we ever see a Bitcoin ETF in the United States?
I don't know. Sometimes I think there is a bit of a hidden agenda there that they want to block it indefinitely. But even though an ETF would not be for me, we don't have any 401k type of pension saving plans. I think it would be good for the market, definitely, because people will be able to divert some of their pension funds to Bitcoin. And I think if they can at least allocate a few percent to Bitcoin, then they will actually have a pension by the time it's time to retire. So yeah, I hope it will happen. But as I said, I think there's a hidden agenda somewhere that they'll just keep blocking it. You can bet on the future of futures and that the price will be going down, trying to kill the market basically. But no, you can't buy any spot Bitcoin or spot prices for your ETF. So no. I don't know, not very hopeful here, Thomas.
It's almost like they could buy insurance for their portfolios in case everything doesn't work out and Bitcoin goes up. They'd always have that Bitcoin as a backup plan. We're running out of time. Dan, Eve, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Oh, I just on the previous one, I just wanted to add that the irony that that they want to protect people from they want to protect their 401ks from exposure to Bitcoin, whereas the people who want them in their 401ks want protection against the dollar. So it's this silly combat, because I certainly want that. I don't keep you got to have a certain amount of your pension in fiat money. Unless you want just sort of real high risk, but the fiat money is just waning and year by year. So, you're losing money in that. So I'd rather be putting that in real money, like Bitcoin. My news or story of the week. No, I've got none. I lead a very boring life nowadays, but it's very mysterious. I'm working on some really cool projects, but I can't say anything about them, which is really frustrating. So so ultimately, I'm a boring man who leads a boring life right now, and I have nothing interesting to say.
I was in one of those once. It's on LinkedIn. It's called a stealth startup. I still get emails. We're so excited by your work with stealth startup. Funny. Stefan Kinsella, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
I was going to say something boring and theoretical, like intellectual property will not stop being enforced by the governments for the foreseeable future. But let me say this. I just came across this thing. Apparently it happened a few days ago. I saw it on someone's feed. It was a Bitcoin masterclass. Have you guys heard of this? By Craig Wright and InChain and Coinbase or whatever it is. And it was like this 2-day seminar in London with like 15 losers in a room, and then like a YouTube channel that no one's watching, and it's like bad audio and just incoherent graphs on a chalkboard. It's all complete bullshit. But I guess my prediction is that the Calvin Ayre, InChain, Craig Wright stuff, it's just going to keep going on for the foreseeable future. Apparently, someone in this nook and crannies has enough money to like keep pushing their former line. And so I guess that, and of course, that was my point earlier with this thing about defining Bitcoin by the Bitcoin blockchain. People could say, well, there's more than one, right? And there have been more than one. So I think that I guess that the shit coiners are going to keep going on for quite some time. I guess that's my prediction.
Excellent. While the government may continue to enforce copyright, we did get a little bit back this year with an early version of Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, joining the public domain, as well as the Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes stories, at least the early ones. Martine Wishmayer, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Story of the week is one of our competitors, Genesis Coin. They use Gen Mega kiosk machines, and they produce software to make it into Bitcoin ATMs. Many of them were sold, and they sold a company to another operator called Bitstop. So many of their clients are now being basically forced into a new software provider. Might not be ideal. There's lots of changes. It's like a big shift in the whole Bitcoin ATM industry. So, if people are operating those Gen Mega kiosks and they don't feel happy with their current software provider being sold to their competitor, then they can contact General Bytes and just install the GM kit, which we've launched like a few months ago, and we've been getting really good reviews on it. So I'm totally stoked, to be honest. Couldn't come at a better time. So we are like the lifeboat for all the other ATM operators that are now being forced to deal with basically a former competitor. So very good timing too. So yeah, it's like, yeah, I had a party a bit, when I heard the news.
Well, this is a great cypherpunk idea that you could upgrade the software on other ATM machines to open your freedom of running the software that you want to run. It's very cool stuff, Martine and General Bytes. Well, thanks to everybody for watching us. Give us a thumbs up down below. Thanks to everybody in the live chat. Give us a comment, subscribe, all those things. Until next time,